Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well out there and that you're staying safe. So today I will make an illustration using only my green markers. But wait, I did actually say markers, which means not only Copics, but also all my green Pro markers and also my green Uhuhu markers. And I think I have some green Spectrum R Tri-Blend markers. And we also have a few of the Arteza Everblend art markers and just a few Touch 5 twin markers, and last we have the artist loft markers. So yeah, today I will try to make an illustration using all of these green markers. I think there are over 80 markers here. So I would say let's start with swatching them. I think that will help me to get some kind of overview of all the different tones I have to work with. Yes, it is green, but there are so many shades of green, all from yellowish green to bluish green, green. So yeah, let's get started, I suppose. I swatched them off their brand, starting with the Copics, and I think I could have gotten pretty far using only these colors because there is a pretty decent range of tones and shades of green. For the Pro markers, I had two colors called tea green and gray green, but I decided to scrap them from the list because they did look very blue to me. It was actually a little tricky to decide what tones that are actually green. Some definitely have a more blue tone or yellow tone, but they are still called green, so I just have to trust that, I suppose. And unfortunately, I also had to scrap a few of the Uhuhu regular bullet tip markers and a bunch of the Touch 5 markers that had dried out. And the artist loft markers, they just looked terrible as always. I was a little bummed out from losing a bunch of dried out markers. I really wanted this to be an 80+ marker challenge, so I looked into every corner of every possible marker stash that I have, and I managed to actually dig up a couple of old Tria and Flex markers. They are the same brand as Pro markers, so some of the colors were just the same, so I had to scrap a few of those. And I also found a random Spectra AD and Cure color marker, which brings us to 81 markers, yay! And then I arranged them after tones: bluish greens, yellowish greens, brownish greens, grayish greens, and so on, just to be able to find them a little easier when doing the illustration. And after doing that very long swatching, let's get to the very long sketching. I will try to not talk about it too long though. So basically I needed to make an illustration where I could cram in as much green as possible. So I came to think about a forest or a jungle scene. So after doing a little bit of sketching and brainstorming, I came up with this sunny jungle glade with ancient ruins and pillars, like some sort of old temple ground where people came to worship cats. What else? I'm sorry, if I can draw cats, I will draw cats. Anyway, the line art, which I decided to do digitally in ProCreate and then print, it took me forever. I ended up doing the layers in different colors just to make it easier for myself to see what is what. There are so many different levels and leaves and leaves. It is just confusing, but I am actually very happy that I did take my time with this. I think it reflects in my art if I create something that I feel pleased with. My latest illustrations has been so much fun to work with because I don't just rush through them to get them done, but I take my time and enjoy the process. So yeah, here it is, the printed line art printed on thick Bristol board, and I was actually considering to make this piece on an even bigger piece of paper, and boy am I glad I didn't do that, because then I would probably still be working on this. My thought was that I would be able to get even more colors in there if I was working on a bigger surface, but after doing a little bit of testing on a smaller paper, I did settle with a smaller size, thankfully. And yes, I am actually thinking of making a coloring book. I would love to do that. Anyway, so yeah, slapping down some greens. I wanted to have this very bright background, like the sun is shining through the leaves, giving the scene a warm glow, and then framing it all with darker leaves. Yeah, 80 markers is a lot. I would have done just fine with the green Copic markers, and to be honest, that was my initial idea, to only use the Copics, but then I got greedy and I needed to use all of them. So to make sure I would actually get all of them greens into the illustration, I could use 4 or 5 or 6 different greens on the same little plant, which might be a little overkill, but it also resulted in a very nice, deep, rich tone. I'm really trying to get an even nice balance between the cooler and the warmer tones, and I'm putting a lot of bright, deeper greens in the foreground and having more translucent, lighter greens in the background to give the illustration a bit of depth. And once I had used one marker, I crossed it off from the list to keep track of the ones I've used. I also tried to put the used marker aside, even if I had only used them for one little leaf. I put them aside so that I could easily see which one I had left to work with. And then when I made sure that I have used almost all of them, I put them back on the desk again, and I could just use them all for the rest of the illustration. So it was a lot of markers to keep track on, and some of them I just used for one little dot here and there just to get them into the illustration, but some of them I used a lot more. One thing that I might address as well, yes, this piece is very similar to the drawing that Bailey J recently posted, cats sitting in a glade surrounded by green leaves. I actually didn't think of her art at all while making this, but maybe it was stuck in my subconscious somewhere, who knows. Anyway, I thought I just wanted to mention it. But yeah, I've been wanting to do this challenge for a while now, using all my art supplies in one specific color for one illustration. But I've also been dreading it because, as you can obviously see, if I would do this challenge using all my green art supplies, I would have a ton of art supplies in markers only. Yes, I am a hoarder. And then adding all the green watercolors, all the green color pencils, and all the other green supplies, that would be a nightmare. So I went with markers only this time, but maybe I can use another art supply next time, or a different color perhaps. I have actually done this challenge before, but with white art supplies. I don't have that many white art supplies, so it worked pretty well actually. But yeah, this illustration, it took a while to finish, but I had a lot of fun working on it, so I didn't really mind. It was a lot of layering and a lot of blending to try to get some kind of cohesiveness in the coloring. I could have made it very easy and simple for myself, just coloring one leaf in one green and another leaf in another green, but that would probably not turn out that well. It would look messy and not very cohesive. So instead I used many different colors on the same leaf, as I mentioned before, and I tried to reuse the colors throughout the whole illustration to tie it together. It was also very interesting to see how all the different markers behaved together. Copics have a very translucent look to them. They have this kind of grainy texture on the paper, like little white specks is showing through, so it works great to have in the background. That should be a little lighter, while the other markers looks more solid on the paper, so it worked great to have in the foreground. The quality is also quite different. The Touch 5 markers, which are pretty cheap, were also pretty bad. Many of them were dried out and had very strong smell to them, like the ink has dried up and gotten more concentrated somehow, but they all worked well to use together. They are all alcohol-based markers, so they should blend and mix nicely. I must say I am very happy with the ruins. I think the sharper edges contrast so well with the more organic shapes, and it just adds more interest to the whole scene, and I am very proud of that stair. It looks so good. And I think I found the perfect color for the ruins too. It is the Copic colors BG96, BG93, G99 and YG93. The gray yellowish greens really gives it this aged and decayed vibes, and it stands out from the rest of the greens, and the cat just brings everything to life, I think. I can't remember where I heard it, maybe in art class sometimes when I still went to school, but I remember that someone talked about when painting a nature scene, how much a living creature can make for the painting. A painting of a forest can be very pretty, but sometimes also very plain and boring, but by just adding some birds to the sky or a deer by the edge of the forest, it immediately adds more interest and life to the painting. So that advice, or whatever you could call it, it stuck with me, and I think of it every time I draw a nature scene. Just a tiny little butterfly can make a big difference, I think. I am just in love with this illustration. As I said before, I think that adding more time and effort into my work is really giving result, and I am always putting time and effort into my work, of course, but I have added even more time on the sketch and the line art process, which is the base of the art basically, so it is quite important. But for a while I was more focused on the process itself, that the road to get to the finished piece was more interesting and important to show in the video than the actual outcome. But I somehow came to think of, why can't the outcome be good too? And now when YouTube is basically my full-time job, I have even more time to spend on the artwork, and I'm also hoping to have more of my art available as prints, and then I want to be happy with the art to make prints of it. But it doesn't mean that every single art of mine has to be a masterpiece. Sometimes it is nice to just create mindless trash art. It works a little like a palette cleanser, I think. You kind of need both the good and the bad art. I think this challenge was so much fun, and I loved working with one of my favorite colors. Let me know if I should do this challenge again sometime, but with a different color, maybe purple. It is also one of my favorite colors. But yeah, I added a little bit of white to the illustration to make it look even more glowy and whimsical, and some whiskers to the cats. And as I said hundreds of times now, I adore this illustration. The cats are adorable, it feels warm and inviting, and I think lately I've created places in my illustrations that I can escape to in my mind. I think we can all need a little bit of distraction right now and imaginary places to escape to for a while. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for even more art, and I hope I will see you next time. Keep drawing my happy cats. Bye!